Hi, everybody. So I am here with my friend Tom, and we are here to discuss the latest in our series on the Star Trek films. We are at Star Trek 3. And so, Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Tom Gunn. I'm a lifelong Star Trek fan, and I'm a writer and editor, though I haven't really written about Star Trek, but I'm happy to talk about it, so here I am.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This one's going to be interesting to talk about. I think it's a little less well known. At least I hadn't heard anything about it uh, until until I watched it. So I think it's going to be interesting to talk about. And so I have my little summary that I do. And so you'll bear with me on this one. Read through, just get an idea, kind of what we're talking about, and then we will get at it. But Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock is the official title, and Star Trek 3 starts off where Wrath of Khan left us. Spock has died, and a new planet has been created by Genesis. Before he dies, Spock transfers his Katra, forgive me if I pronounce things wrong, or spirit to Mccoy, which makes Mccoy act strangely. He is detained, and the Enterprise is informed the ship will be decommissioned because of the Genesis fallout. Kirk's son David and Lieutenant Saavik are on the Genesis planet and discover a slug-like life form. Spock has also been resurrected as a child. Marcus, it turns out, used proto-matter in creating Genesis, which causes the planet to be unstable and destructive. There's also a Klingon commander named Krug who destroys this life form and imprisons David, Saavik, and Spock, the child Spock. Meanwhile, Spock's father, Sarek, is angry with Kirk over Spock's death and his body being left on the Genesis planet. Both Spock's body and the Katra are needed for the Vulcan burial. Kirk frees McCoy and steals the Enterprise to go and get Spock's body. Krug attacks the Enterprise, and then Krug kills David to anger Kirk. As the Klingons are boarding the Enterprise, Kirk activates the self-destruct sequence, destroying the Enterprise. However, the crew goes to the Genesis planet. Kirk and Krug fight with Kirk, throwing Krug off of a cliff. With Kirk throwing Krug off of a cliff. The movie ends with Spock's Katra being united with his body, and Spock is returned with a partial memory of previous events.
Okay, pretty good.
Yeah. So, okay. So, what were your overall thoughts on the rewatch for you? This is my first time watching it. Or you've seen it before?
Yeah, many times. It's one of the first Star Trek movies that I was really aware of. In fact, I think I saw it in the theater,
Okay.
not totally understanding what was going on, having not seen two, right?
Okay.
But it definitely made an impact, and I walked out of the theater with the music really ringing in my head. Um, and actually, I really particularly like the music in this one.
Yes.
But it's not hugely important as a Star Trek movie, except as a bridge between movies. But that doesn't mean it's bad.
Sure.
There's a lot of fun in it, and I had a lot of fun hanging out with these characters, and that's definitely one of the things this is good for.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said. It was released in 1984. Just and for me, when I finished watching it, I said, "Wow, this is the most like accessible of the Star Trek movies that we've seen so far of the three." To me,
Yeah, that's
um,
interesting.
yeah, like it feels more like sort of the J.J. Abrams films, just sort of fun kind of. But on the other hand, it was kind of forgettable. Like, I had to admit today, I was glad that I had written out that summary on Monday, because if I hadn't, I almost would have had to watch the movie again, because I had forgotten so much of what had happened, and I just watched it Monday night. So whereas like Khan, that stays with you,
Yeah.
and even the first one is so like strange in a way, like it's so sort of boldly, I don't know.
Ambitious. Yeah.
That ambitious, that's a good word. That you kind of remember it, but this I just had completely forgotten everything that happened. So I think that's probably the downside to it, is that yes, it's sort of more of a blockbuster feel to it, but it's not particularly maybe that most memorable. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily like bad by any means. I enjoyed it. So I'll ask you, as a fan of this, as someone who's watched the TV show, how does this relate to the series at all? Is this connected at all to the series, or is it?
I should say so. Well, a couple of things about the relationship between those two, and between the
Okay.
series and this particular movie. In the series, we see Uhura, we see Scotty, we see Sulu, we see Chekhov, but they're not really explored that well. They're mostly feeding lines to Kirk, Spock, and McCoy throughout the
Mm-hmm.
series. There's no Uhura episode of Star Trek. Like, that doesn't happen.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and part of it is the culture of TV in 1967 through 1969, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're banking on people not binge watching on Netflix, but maybe catching it, on Friday night,
Right.
So it's a very different kind of dynamic. Um, this movie is a great showcase of who these people are, and in a very concise way, we know who Uhura is, we know who
Mm-hmm.
Sue is, we see much more of Scotty, right, than we typically have, and because they're given something fun to do
Mm-hmm.
in sort of the caper of stealing the Enterprise,
Right.
and also doing it in the name of saving their friend Spock, right? So there's emotion tied to it, but there's also that fun freewheeling stuff. I like how you said that you compared it to the more recent movies, because yeah, there is that kind of fun freewheeling. You see the characters for who they are, all that kind of stuff. Another way that it relates to the original series is there's a really cool parallel. There's an episode where the previous captain of the Enterprise, Captain Pike, um, whom Spock served with, is paralyzed, and he's in a situation where Spock steals the Enterprise, risks his career, risks everything to make sure that his old captain gets a safe and happy retirement, as pleasant a retirement as possible. I won't get into all the details, but
Sure.
if you want to learn more about that, the episode is called "The Menagerie," and it's a two-parter, part one and part two,
Okay.
and it's in season one, and it's one of my favorites. I love The Menagerie.
Okay.
Um,
And so do they talk about on the series at all about the Ponfar and
yes,
some of those Vulcan things? Okay, so that wasn't introduced in this.
right. Okay, so for those that don't know, Ponfar is this condition that Vulcan males go through, where if they don't mate, they die. Um, so yeah, make no mistake about it, Savick has sex with Spock, this young Spock version of Spock on the Genesis planet. Um, but before you cast any human judgments on it, it was a life-saving
Right.
play. Um, so yeah, there's a classic episode called Amok Time. I strongly recommend you check out that one. It's loved by fans and non-fans alike. It's a really great piece of TV. Um, and let's see, any other ties? Well, I mean, the Enterprise, the original Enterprise, is destroyed. That's a
Right.
significant moment for fans, right?
Yeah, I would definitely talk about that a little bit later. But so this film has 78% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Sounds
So
about right.
yeah, and I thought it was interesting. The TV guide, it said it's reasonably entertaining, fair for non-fans. So that kind of echoes what we've been talking about. And so I guess my other question before we kind of dig into the story as much is, do you think that it sort of loses some of that sci-fi feel that we had in the first two films, and I assume in the series, or do you think it's still sort of in keeping enough in that sort of sci-fi feel?
Well, there are some sci-fi things I like about this, and other things that don't work so well.
Okay.
Spock's Ponfar or Spock's not Ponfar, Spock's Katra being able to be returned to his body is it's just woo woo magic, and don't question it. It just works, right? I'm a little
Right.
bit annoyed with how lazy that is, but I can't say that Star Trek has always been really rigorous in its science through every in the original series through every episode. I do like the aspect of the Genesis planet being created with protomatter and David making a choice to try to make a shortcut and get
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, that stuff is interesting.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that too. So so we have Leonard Nimoy directing in this, and uh can you sense any of his sort of style or him? Uh, can you tell at all that he's the one directing and how he handles kind of the story?
Yeah, I'm not working from much of a sample. He directed this and then Star Trek 4. And one thing that this has in common with the other film, Star Trek 4, I see that he has a real affection for the characters and the way that they interact with each other and
Yeah,
for what they bring to the ensemble. I think there was maybe some discomfort on Nimoy's part that it was only him and DeForest Kelly and William Shatner in the spotlight for so long. I think he wanted to
yeah,
move it around and say, "Hey, these people have a lot to contribute."
yeah.
There's also the factor of in a movie where Spock is directing, Spock can't be on camera all that much, right? He's busy.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of felt that way too. That like I don't know, there was just sort of a friendliness to it that
Yeah,
I know you could kind of feel. And from what I've heard, what I've read, I think that Shatner and Nimoy and that they were a pretty close cast. Am I right in that?
for the most
They
part,
were
there was
pretty
some.
friendly.
Yeah, for the most part, there were some personality chafes. George Takei's writing about William Shatner has been a little bit. There was a
Mm.
little bit of not bad blood, but they didn't exactly gel as personalities.
Okay.
But yeah, but for the most part, yeah, they know and like each other. They've always been happy to see each other, particularly William Shatner and Leonard
Yeah.
Nimoy. Um,
You can just kind of tell, I feel like, when a director has sort of affection for those characters and for the
yeah,
world. And,
I
it's kind
can
of
see it
like,
for sure.
did you see the Fantastic Four movie?
The most recent one?
Yeah. Did you
No,
see it?
I missed that one.
Yeah, that is a good example of the opposite, where you could tell a director had kind of contempt for his characters. They didn't like him. He thought,
Hmm.
and so I just feel like you can just kind of tell when you get that feeling. So yeah, I could kind of
No, but
feel
I do
that.
remember the Joel Schumacher Batman movies, and I had the same feeling.
Yeah, yeah, that's another good example. Okay, so um, my now we're getting into sort of the story. So the story of the Katra and Spock's body. Does it work for you? Is it too cute a solution to bring Spock back from the dead? Just kind of what you had mentioned, and I'll give you my opinion first. Yeah, it kind of is, but I think it's okay for this kind of movie. Uh, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of there's sort of a feel of almost Spock is almost like a kind of a messianic kind of character in a way, and he has this resurrection. So I kind of felt like they were kind of going that way. I thought it was fine. I don't know. What did you think about the Katra?
Yeah, I think the Vulcan mysticism stuff is fun enough that I'm willing to overlook sort of the hokiness of it.
Yeah,
I love the costumes. That's one of the things I pay attention to in movies. You wouldn't, I'm straight and everything, but I love costumes in movies. That's
yeah,
and I really I latch onto that and I pay attention to that. And I love the Vulcan stuff in this. It's really fun. I like um, the pageantry and the sets and the ceremony, all that stuff. If Spock magically getting better after having been dead is, um, if what comes with that is all that fun stuff, I'm okay with it.
yeah. And I'd say the costumes look more sort of timeless than the Wrath of Khan costumes.
Yeah,
Those look more dated.
yeah, that's true. For the most part, I think that's true. There is a, uh, I was reading that actually there were a lot of costumes that were just reused from Wrath of Khan, but at
Oh,
least
well.
that's in terms of like Starfleet uniforms, right?
Yeah,
Those aren't going to change dramatically, right? So they
that
can just
makes
put them back
sense.
in the closet.
That makes sense. Okay, so my next question is, what do you think of McCoy in this film and Deforest Kelly's performance? So he's got kind of, I think he gets a lot of time, because he figures he's got this Katra of Spock in him, and he ends up getting uh, like incarcerated basically, and there's some good sort of humor in him, and they kind of break him free, and there's just sort of a lot with that. Like, what did you think of that?
I really enjoyed all that business. This is one of the reasons I like this movie. This is high on my list for the among Star Trek movies for that reason.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I've always been a big McCoy fan, and I love that he has so much good stuff to do. Yes, he's
Yeah,
funny and he gets to be grouchy, which is fun to watch. But he does but it's he also has something significant to do in the story.
yeah,
And his relationship with Spock is definitely it's there's depth added to that. They don't just snipe at each other anymore. There's a little bit more to it, and that fun will continue in Star Trek 4.
because he's practically a cameo in the other two. I mean, he's really hardly in them at all. And I did think this was interesting. One of the reviews I read, they said, because we've talked a little bit about how, like, for me at least, there's really no similarity between Star Trek and Star Wars. They're very different. But I thought this was an interesting critique, and I wanted your feedback on it. He says, this is Josh Larson, critic. He says, there is also an unfortunate attempt to recreate the famous alien bar scene from Star Wars, where we get a morose Bones McCoy instead of Greedo.
Okay.
What do you think? Do you think that's fair, or?
Okay, real talk. Yeah, that's the sets and costumes in that are a little cheesy.
Yeah.
They don't hold up. It doesn't hold up if you're comparing it to Star Wars.
Do you think they were trying to emulate Star Wars in that scene?
I
I
don't
never
think
thought of
so.
that when I watched it.
I didn't think of it either, really. But it's hard to say absolutely not. There's no influence, right?
Hmm.
And that's pretty much Star Wars and American cinema. Period. How do you say this? Especially
Yeah, that's fair.
blockbuster sci-fi. How do you say there's no influence at all?
Well, and I never would have thought of Greedo with McCoy. I mean, because Greedo, he doesn't have any lines. He's not a, like, I mean, I guess he does have lines, but only a couple. He's not a major character in the story. So I guess that I mean, lots of, are we going to say every movie that has a bar scene is ripping off of Star Wars? I don't know. I didn't see it that way, but it is. Didn't Return of the Jedi come out in 1984? So
I thought it was 83, but yeah, it was
maybe 83. It's around then. So maybe it was fresh on their minds. I don't know. It could be, but anyway, I thought it was interesting. So as we talked about already, so I really enjoyed the side characters in this film, particularly Uhuru. Uhuru, is that how you say it? Uhura. Uhura, and Sulu. And I had read, I can't remember, or if it was like I saw her interviewed, the actress, on Oprah or something like that, and they are saying how, like, she had been such a kind of a big deal for being an African American actress on a major show, a network show like that, and should not be a African American, just to be a member of the crew.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of a big deal. And anyway, so it just kind of made me I think that Star Trek, better than Star Wars, to be honest, does a good job of really appealing to a wide range of people. I just remember Oprah saying, like, oh, I could see, there's somebody that looked like me on the show, and you could say there's an Asian kid could see Sulu and look at that, and this I really thought, or even even Nimoy has some that look to him, and anyway, I thought that this particularly Uhuru, sorry, I don't know why. Uhura. I thought that she was really funny in this. Yeah. She was kind of sassy, and she made me laugh. So I
Yeah, she's fantastic.
yeah.
I'll share a cool story that's well known among fans, but maybe not so much well known among the general population. Um, so she was actually planning on leaving the original series when they were transitioning to season 2,
Mhm.
and um, Martin Luther King Jr. got wind of this and convinced her to stay. He said, "You need to stay. This is the only show I let my kids stay up and watch because you're on it."
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. It's hard to underestimate how significant she was in terms of the civil rights movement, and she's a doll too. I mean, she's a great lady. She's still around. She still hits the conventions from time to time. And yeah, she's a cool lady. And yeah, you definitely
Yeah.
she had got some freedom here to create this character a little bit more,
Mhm.
and it's definitely fun to watch.
What was her? Let's see. What's her name? It's
Nichelle Nichols.
Nichelle Nichols. Yeah, Nichelle Nichols. Uhura. Um, yeah, and so I think that's really cool. You know that um that it shows the I think the power of because people are really quick to uh we don't have to get into or anything, but like I just noticed when there was talk about that whole X-Men billboard thing, you know, to be like, oh, it's just a movie, nobody cares, you know, it's just an image from a movie, and I'm like, no, that's not true. Like images that we see actually really like you can debate whether it's in good taste or not. It doesn't really matter for this, but I do think it actually matters. Images actually do matter, and the people that we see actually do make a difference. I think, especially for kids when they see somebody who looks like them. And I remember, like I said, I remember Oprah saying that like this was someone who looked like me
Yeah.
on the TV. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's really
that
cool.
character had a huge impact on our culture. When you look at
Hmm.
people like Oprah Winfrey, Whoopi Goldberg,
Yeah.
LeVar Burton, um,
Oh yeah, LeVar
name
Burton.
practically name someone who's black and is in popular entertainment, and they'll cite Uhura on Star Trek as an influence.
Yeah.
Just about anybody.
Well, and I think it also compared to let's say like oh what's it called? Can't think of the show. Um, split my mind, but as opposed to shows that are all African American, but for this just to be incorporated as a normal person.
Right, and in
It,
none of the episodes is it ever brought up that that at least among the crew that she is the black woman.
right,
That never comes up. Never
right.
comes up. Now
Yeah.
there is one episode where there's an alien who refers to her as a Nubian princess, right? But
Oh,
he's a
okay.
racist jerk, right? He's supposed to be a jerk,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, "What?" In 1968,
Yeah.
1967, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's
mean,
cool.
that's yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I really like both of them. They were really fun. And okay. So, what did you think of Krug as a villain compared to Khan? His plan is a little muddled, and he's more of a big baddie rather than a terrifying despot to me.
A couple things about that. And this kind of goes back to I want to step back a little bit to the Star Wars comparison.
Sure.
Here's one big way that Star Trek is really significantly different from Star Wars. In Star Wars, what makes an alien is their costume. That's fundamentally what makes them alien, right?
Right.
Instead of having a head like he's a big hammerhead, or he looks like a yak or something, like he's just really out there look, which is cool. Don't get me wrong, I love that. But in Star Trek, what makes an alien is who they are, how they
Mm.
act.
That's
So
really interesting.
that bar scene, the alien that he encounters, yeah, he's this guy who's got big ears. Like it's not that impressive a costume, but he talks weird. He obviously he just thinks in a different way than you and I do. You feel like you're encountering someone who's truly other, um, and but in a way that's also recognizably human. And Star Trek does that extremely well.
I never thought about that, but you're right. You're right. That's really interesting.
Um, Now, to be fair to Star Wars, Frank Oz's performance of Yoda is a significant exception to that rule, but it is the rule. Mostly, if you see an alien in Star Wars, it's their costume that makes them who they are, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I'm trying to think of Chewbacca. Is Chewbacca an exception to that rule? I mean, 'cause he has personality and it's
Sure,
kind of
but the most
accepted.
significant thing about him, I feel like, is the costume. Like, I feel like your costume is really what grabs you and stays in your memory.
Hmm.
Um,
His
anyway,
friendship, his
we can go rant on about that, but
no, but
I
it's a
think
really I get it. It's an interesting point. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I can see that because there's even aliens in the crew
yeah,
of Star Trek in all of these movies
mhm,
that are around and kind of um I mean Spock is an
yeah,
alien.
yeah, exactly.
So,
Um, but now getting to Krug, yeah, Christopher Lloyd's performance is really great and really gripping. It The poor guy had to follow up Ricardo Montalban, right?
yeah,
And I think he
it's
played
tough.
himself really well.
So it works for you. The
Absolutely,
Okay.
he's he's kind of a scary guy. And also too, he kind of helps define who Klingons are.
Okay.
Um,
I was
the
gonna
Yeah, and in terms of larger Star Trek, in the original series, they were kind of there. First of all, there was no makeup on the Klingons in the original series, other than just making their skin dark and maybe giving them like Van Dykes and stuff.
because in the first movie, don't we briefly see Klingons? Am I right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
and they have the makeup and everything. Though we don't really get to see how they interact, what the culture is like on the ship. But here we see that if a Klingon officer screws up, the captain has every right to execute him. Right. We
Hmm.
also see Krug's lover or wife die honorably. Right. So we definitely get more of a sense of this warrior culture. That is not just, oh, we're a bunch of bikers and we just kill, or we're just a bunch of stinkers and we just like to be bad guys. There's a rhyme and a reason to it. There's an ethos
Hmm.
backing all that up. So this is the first real whiff of that we get in Star
Maybe
Trek.
some of that was lost on me. I'll admit it, because he just seemed kind of. I thought that he was okay. He kind of seemed like I don't know, just his plan to was the cloaking device and to get Genesis as a weapon or whatever seemed kind of muddled and kind of to me. And he was fine. He did the job, and I didn't hate it, but
Yeah.
it wasn't particularly memorable to me.
Okay.
Um, but I didn't think about all those things that you just mentioned. So that's really interesting. It's interesting. Yesterday, I went and saw the Warcraft movie, and I
Hmm.
hated it. I didn't like it at all. But already, as I've been talking to a couple people who know more about it than I do, I'm already like, oh, that makes a little more sense. So sometimes it does help to kind of digest things with somebody who knows something about it.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, um,
I hope that the similarities between Star Trek and Warcraft can end there. I hope that we can draw the line right there.
yeah, ooh, rough. Okay, so let's see. Okay. The special effects I thought were really good in this. I thought just all the explosions and all the I can't even to me they held up really well. What about you? What do you
For
think?
the most part, I'd say that that's true. Some of the practical stuff looks a little hokey to me. Um,
Mhm.
Sometimes the Genesis planet is beautiful, and other times I feel like I'm watching them run around the greens department at Paramount Studios, and I'm less convinced. So yeah, sometimes it really looks like a studio, a sound stage, and other times not so much.
That would
Um,
also be true about Warcraft.
right.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, and it did kind of change. Like sometimes it looks like the Grand Canyon, and other times it looks really lush, and it does sort of change depending on the moment.
Well, yeah, they're
Genesis.
trying to make it this. That's sort of the idea of it, though, is that you've got all these biomes kind of mashed together, and which is sort of it's a fun idea, but the execution is a little. It doesn't. The execution probably held up fine in 1984, but now it doesn't.
Yeah,
It's not quite as impressive.
right. So here's one question I had. So David is presented in this as the lead scientist, who is the one who chose to use the proto matter. I didn't get that feeling at all in Wrath of Khan. I felt like Carol, his mom, was the lead scientist, the one who would have been making all of the decisions, and so I felt that was a little bit confusing. What
Good
do you
point.
think?
Good point. I think though that it's just a matter of the story. I think it's a simple fact of spoiler alert. David needed to be the one to die, not Carol. So,
Okay.
and also you have the the son reflecting the father stuff going on there, which it's more fun that way. I do get the
Mhm.
impression though that in Star Trek 2 that David is at least a lead scientist. He's at least very in charge. He doesn't strike me as an intern in that movie.
But somebody who would have made that big of a decision, you definitely would strike it as that big of a leader to me. But you could be right. I've only seen it one time, so
Well, and
uh,
I'd love to know what Carol thought of it if she knew about it. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
I forget. She's not in this, right?
no.
Yeah, I forgot. So okay, let's see. Okay. What do you think about the death of David? Was it handled well in the film? I personally thought Shatner was really good in those scenes. I thought he was emotional. He sold me, that this was somebody he really cared about, that he loved, and it was painful for him. So I thought he did a good job. Uh, for somebody who's not necessarily known for their great emotional acting, I thought he did well.
Yeah, well, and I think that was an effective device in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's actually really big of Kirk that he's in this place where he cares about another person more than he cares about his job or his ship or
Mm-hmm.
Starfleet or any of that stuff. So throughout the movie, he casts all that stuff aside, and he seems pretty cool with it. He's actually holding his own pretty well. But when this whole thing costs him his son's life, that's when you see him really feel the cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it all comes down on him at once, just how much he's lost as a result of what he's trying to do.
Yeah, well, and I think that he feels more ownership on the death of David versus the death of Spock. Like, he is very sad about the death of Spock, but like it was a noble thing and it was a heroic thing. Versus he feels more this is kind of his fault.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, hold that thought especially as we get into the next couple of movies.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, so my next question is, so Spock experiences Ponfar, and I guess how did you feel like that was sort of handled? And yeah, then I have a follow-up question. I don't know. What do you think about Ponfar?
It was weird.
It is kind of weird.
Understand what's going on. When I was a kid, it went right over my head.
Yeah.
But when I know what's going on,
It
it
is
was
kind of weird.
But I think they handled that weird thing about as well as they possibly could.
Yeah.
About as tastefully as they possibly could. Yeah, without it turning into the reader, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I guess it's just one of those things that Vulcans have to do, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Yeah,
all
it's
Vulcans
fan
have to
service.
do this.
It's fan service. All Vulcan males have to do this, yeah.
Okay, and this is something that is addressed in the show, then you said.
Yeah, and they do it or they die. Like that's
And it has to be when he's like, do all Vulcans age so quickly as he does in this?
No. So the reason Spock ages so quickly is that he's on Genesis. His body is on Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
So the Genesis planet renewed his body, and at the same rate that the Genesis planet itself grows and develops. Right,
Do you think? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, like for instance, you see those slug creatures early on in the episode, but by the time Krug gets there, that slug creature has evolved into this huge snake thing. It's really quite different.
Yeah.
Right. So that's Genesis. It's like that. I don't know the name of it.
Do you think that the Genesis is a bit of a MacGuffin? Do you know a MacGuffin? Yeah.
It is a MacGuffin, but it's a pretty good one because it has an impact on lots of different parts of the story.
It can just kind of be whatever the writers want it to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of the definition of it. But this one pushes the limits of that definition because it affects so much of what's going on in the story. You couldn't replace it with just any old thing.
Okay. Yeah, one thing I thought was weird. So there's this new life that's been created because of the proto matter, right? And I thought that would figure more into the story, because Krug kind of kills it pretty easily, it seemed like to me, and then it's gone and you don't really hear about it again.
Right.
Right?
Well, I think the perspective is that like this planet, the life that's on it, is an experiment gone awry, and that it's really like a flash in the pan. Like it's born, it's lived, it's dying now, and it just it just went away. And I
Okay.
and I'm sure that Starfleet would have some interest in what happened to it, but I think they're mostly embarrassed about the political things that have gone on, and that the next movie does explore that a little bit more. We see the political impact of everything that's happened.
What do you
Because,
mean, political impact?
well, because the Klingons are now involved. The Klingons have found out this Genesis thing exists,
Oh,
um, where the Klingons are in the process of maybe warming up to the Federation. This is seen as a slap in the face. Like, wait a minute, you're developing arms? What the hell, right? Um,
okay.
when word gets back to the people Krug is defying, right? Krug is sort of a renegade.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not acting officially on behalf of his government. He thinks his government is going soft because they're warming up to the Federation. He's an old school Klingon who wants to see Kirk's head on a stick. Um, all right,
And
he's
why
sort of
does he hate Kirk so much?
well,
Remind
because
me.
he's a Klingon.
Klingon.
Kirk is known in the series for bamboozling the Klingons a lot.
Oh, okay.
That line, "No tricks, Kirk," is because he's read this guy's file. He knows what Kirk is all about, and in a way, he feels like he's really caught the 20-pound salmon here with when he's caught the Enterprise. And so he's probably eager to take it as a trophy. Um, Kirk is known in the Empire, so um, there's a fan joke that uh, half of Klingon opera is about you know killing Kirk in glorious battle. The other half of Klingon opera is about dying at the hands of Kirk in glorious battle.
That's funny. I wouldn't have known any of that. That's interesting. Okay, that makes sense. Then, okay. So, what do you think this movie is trying to say? Because the other two movies I felt like had a strong sort of metaphor about, sort of a sci-fi metaphor, especially the first one. Do you feel like there's any sort of broader message in this film?
Not much of one, I guess. Um, there's a message about age, and that age doesn't really matter all that much.
Mm-hmm.
You are who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Spock is who he is. Uh, Uhura is who she is.
All right.
Right,
That's good.
where Mr. Adventure talks about, oh, your career's winding down. I'm sure this is fine for you, but I want to get out there. And I think all of them show that like, yeah, they're getting on, but they still are who they are. And in fact,
Yeah.
Kirk,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, just one thing I'll add. But in fact, what Kirk does is asserting his personality by honoring his promise to Sarek, no matter what it costs him.
That makes sense. I think that you get maybe a little bit of a message of resurrection, rebirth, kind of a thing with Spock and the Katra and the that kind of if Spock is sort of the messianic character of Star Trek world, then I think that there's a little bit of kind of a, a resurrection type message, rebirth. Whereas the first one had a huge like birth metaphor. I felt like,
Right. Right.
yeah,
I can see
and
that.
the second one is a lot about sacrifice and the relationships that we have and things like that, and then the third one is a little bit more about rebirth and resurrection. So I don't know, maybe a stretch, but
Well, I think the most significant line about them, if there's a message to be found in this, is where Sarek says to Kirk something like, "Look at all this cost you. Are you sure this was worth it? Look what this cost you." And he said,
yeah,
"If I hadn't done this, it would have cost me my soul."
yeah, I'm glad you remembered that. I really liked that line. That was interesting.
Yeah.
that he had to do it or he wouldn't be who he is. Like he wouldn't be able to live kind of without it. That I thought that was really really interesting. Okay, I just have a couple more questions. So Spock is reunited with his body in the what was the name of that ceremony? Um,
I don't remember the name of it.
it's just Spock's Katra being united with his body, and he gets his partial memory of, and that's kind of a nice moment. He says Jim, you know, and
Yeah.
but I don't. Did you like that or was it cheesy? It's a little cheesy.
I would have thought it was cheesy if I hadn't seen Star Trek 4. But
oh, and that's even cheesier.
all better. If he was just all better in the next movie, then I would be like, oh, okay, come on. But
okay,
this one, but since I know that it kind of takes a while for his personality to completely install,
okay,
then I know it's okay. So yeah, the next one you kind of see that you see him kind of become himself again. And then it takes a while. It's not over in a minute.
Interesting. Okay. So I just have so when the Enterprise blows up, is that you were saying that was a super kind of impactful moment on fans back in the day, but how does it work within the story now for you? I don't know. What do you think of that?
I love that ship, and I hate to see it blow up, but I love that it takes the Klingons with it.
Mm-hmm.
She takes the Klingons with her. I love that that it's most of his Krug's crew is on the ship when it goes, um, and also that it was a part of Kirk's sacrifice. Right? It was. I like that it was a part of what it cost him to save Spock, and I love to see like first. Well, for one thing, as we'll see later, there's worse ways for the Starship Enterprise to go.
Okay.
This is about as good as you could get, I think.
Interesting. So it's not its first end in the
It's
series
not the
then.
last time we'll see the Starship Enterprise blow up.
All right. Okay, then just last question I have is it ends with a be continued. Does the film leave you wanting more and eager to find out what happens next?
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean, but it's hard for me to say since I'm
Since you
I've
know.
so long. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that not as much too. I mean, because you have, for me, I mean, you just
Yeah.
Spock is dead. Like that's huge, and so it's not quite as big a cliffhanger as the emotion of scenes, Spock and the funeral and everything like that. It's not quite as impactful, but I think it works. I didn't mind it with it to be continued, and it's kind of interesting when you think of. I didn't know going into this that 2, 3, and 4 are kind of like a trilogy.
Yeah.
In a way, and the 4 actually, I was looking on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a higher score.
Mm-hmm.
It's 86%, I think.
Yeah.
But so it'll be interesting to watch that, and that was also directed by Leonard Nimoy. And from what I've heard, it's 5 is the one that's the real turkey.
Yeah.
Is a not good one.
Yeah.
So okay. Well, that was kind of all my questions. Did you have any other parts you wanted to talk about?
Let's see. No, I don't think so. I guess I would just say again, coming away from this viewing, I was really impressed by the story of Kirk following through with his integrity. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I liked seeing Kirk be Kirk, and it's you see a lot of cowboy diplomacy going on with the crew, where this is how they operate. Like, you want to know what's fun about the original Enterprise crew? This is what's
Mm.
about them. They're willing to break the rules. They're willing to steal ships. They're willing to do anything if it's the right thing.
Right.
And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and like I said, you really do feel a lot of chemistry, I think, between everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't know if you necessarily feel in the other ones as much as this one, of the other two. This one, it just feels like a real team, which is nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, that is all that I basically had. And so, where can people find you if they want to?
Tgunwriter.com. You can find me on Twitter at Elmono Roboto.
Okay, great. And I'm at Smiling LDS Girl, and I will put all of that in the description section, and we will try to get to 4 as soon as we can. So thanks so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay.